The letter from my son's school was chilling, but not as chilling as the basement. Dear Mr. Timkins, and I'm writing to you because I think it's important that we discuss Billy's recent behavior in class. I have tried contacting you over the phone on several occasions, but have been unsuccessful in getting through. I would appreciate it if you could get in touch with me to arrange a meeting at your earliest convenience. Let me start off by saying that Billy is a very bright young man. He's truly gifted across the board. I'm not exaggerating when I say that the boy has one of the most impressive scientific minds I've seen in years, especially when it comes to chemistry and biology. He may only be 11, but he has more knowledge in these areas than plenty of adults I know. Whatever work you've been doing with him outside the classroom, it's clearly paid off in that respect. I'm also conscious that the circumstances at home have not been easy for any of you recently. I'm aware that Billy's grandfather passed away a few months back. It must be a very difficult time, so please do accept my sincere condolences, and know that I wouldn't be contacting you if I didn't deem the matter an urgent one. As long as I've known him, Billy has kept to himself. He's always been one of those children who are just as happy, if not happier, in their own company. Eating by himself at lunchtime, playing on his own, he's always struck me as something of a shy boy, and he has never struck me up until the past few weeks as a violent one. But recently there have been causes for concern. 3 incidents in particular that I wanted to address with you. We can discuss these in more detail when you come in, but I've outlined them below so you understand the seriousness of the situation. The first incident took place a couple of weeks ago. Billy had a falling out with another boy in the playground. I don't know what the disagreement was about, and neither boy will tell me. But another little girl was playing nearby, and she tells me she heard your son say to the other young man, "If you don't back off, my granddad will get you. He knows how to do magic. He can make you disappear." Those exact words. Now, I'm aware that these are very difficult circumstances. Billy is almost certainly still grieving for his grandfather, and I know grief can often present itself in unusual ways. But despite this, I cannot completely excuse Billy. I'm told the other boy was quite distressed, and we cannot tolerate threatening language like that in our school. A second incident took place last week. I was having a chat with Billy after class because he wanted to talk through his maths homework with me, make sure he understood it. As you can probably imagine, this isn't a common occurrence with the children in my class, so I was more than happy to help. But as he was reaching into his rucksack to get his textbook, a tin fell out. Not the pencil case he always has on his desk, but a plain red tin I hadn't seen before. When it fell out of his rucksack, it landed on the ground and broke open. There were insects inside it, dead, dismembered insects, flies with their wings removed, a chopped up worm, a spider with half its legs pulled off which still seemed to be alive and tried crawling away across the carpet. The only other thing in the tin besides the insects was a small pair of tweezers. Now, I want you to know Billy gave me an explanation for all this. He told me the bugs were part of an experiment. He said he'd been trying to teach himself about anatomy, so he'd been collecting some insects to dissect. I asked him why the spider was still alive if that was the case, but he told me he thought it had been dead when he was out operating on it. Said it must have gone into shock. If I'm honest, I'm not sure what to believe. As I'm sure you can appreciate, I found the whole thing rather disturbing, and it's even more troubling in light of the final matter I wanted to discuss with you. This last incident took place yesterday. It involved another little girl in Billy's class called Annabelle. Mrs. Herbert, our teaching assistant, was the one who found them. Billy and Annabelle were in a far corner of the school field during lunch, behind some bushes. Mrs. Herbert was patrolling the area, she told me, when she heard screams. She went to investigate, and when she walked around those bushes, she found Billy standing over the little girl. Annabelle had tears running down her face. Mrs. Herbert said she had her arms raised over her head, as if to defend herself, and in Billy's hand was a pair of silver tweezers, the same pair I'd seen fall out of his bag last week. Now, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you here, Mr. Timkins. When Mrs. Herbert told me this, I wanted to suspend Billy on the spot. I wanted him gone. Our school has a zero-tolerance policy when it comes to bullying. But the problem is, Mrs. Herbert didn't actually see a son do anything to the girl, and both children insist that they were only playing. I spoke to them both separately, and they had the same exact story. They were playing at being doctors, and Billy was pretending to operate on Annabelle. When I asked her why she'd been crying if that was the case, she clammed up, wouldn't say anything else to me at all, and did notice that she had a red patch on the back of her head, however. A bald spot that had begun to scab over. If I had to guess, Mr. Timkins, I'd say your son was using those tweezers to pull the hairs out of her scalp. And the only other bit of information I have is something Mrs. Herbert told me, something the girl apparently said shortly after Mrs. Herbert found them both, something she let slip while she was still upset. And Mrs. Herbert was comforting her, telling the girl she could tell her anything she wanted, and Annabelle turned to her and said, I can't say anything bad about Billy, Mrs. Herbert, or he'll make it worse. His granddad's a ghost. He'll come through my window and get me while I'm sleeping." Again, that's a direct quote. Mrs. Herbert tried to get more out of her, but she wouldn't say anything else. "Anyway, I apologize for the long letter, Mr. Timkins. I know the past few months can't have been easy. I'm also aware that the change in Billy's behavior is very likely linked to his recent bereavement, especially given what the other children have said about his grandfather. I'm sure you can see now why it's crucial that we speak as soon as possible. The school wants to support Billy as much as we can, but in the meantime, we simply cannot have him threatening or hurting other students. I do hope you'll contact me on the number below as soon as you receive this, so we can arrange an appointment and get to the bottom of the matter. Yours sincerely, Mr. Hartford, pet of year 6 spent." Just as I finished reading that letter, I heard the front door of the house snick shut. I glanced at my watch. Billy. It was Billy, home from school. The letter had left me feeling very anxious, so I decided to waste no time. I marched to the front of the house, planning to confront him straight away. Billy was unslinging his rucksack when I entered the hallway. He glanced up at me and I saw his eyes widen when he noticed the look on my face. I thrust the letter in front of him. "Oh, I just got this from your teacher, Mr. Hartford," I said. "I want you to read it, and then I want you to explain yourself." "Oh," Billy stared down at the letter. A lock of black hair from his fringe had fallen in front of his eyes, and he swept it aside with a shaking hand. The shaking only got worse as he read what his teacher had written. "Well?" I demanded a few minutes later. Billy looked at the ground, refusing to meet my eyes. He didn't say anything. "Right," I said. "Might come with me." I took Billy's arm and led him through the house, chastising him as I went. "Now, the thing you need to understand, young man, is that when you act out at school, it doesn't just affect you." We were walking through the dining room now, en route to a little hallway at the back of the house. And it risks affecting our entire family. We entered the hallway and paused beside a closed door. I stared at Billy, who was looking up at me with frightened eyes. "Well, what do you have to say for yourself?" Despite the fear in his face, Billy met my gaze. I'm sorry, Dad," he spluttered. "I'm really sorry. I saw that his eyes had started glistening with tears. In that moment, he didn't look violent or capable of hurting anyone. He looked like a little boy. And just like that, I knew I couldn't be angry with him. Tensing my whole body, I pulled open the door we were standing beside, the door to the basement. All at once, the hallway was filled with the sound of high-pitched screams. The noise made me feel ill. I found myself reflecting almost absently what an efficient job the builders did with the soundproofing down there. Really thorough. I told them at the time Billy would be using the room to practice his drumming. Said we didn't want any noise whatsoever to escape. They obviously listened. "Oh, look, Billy," I said. "I know how much you miss your granddad, and you know what a special man he was, don't you?" Billy nodded. "And you know that the special instructions he left for us have to be followed very carefully, right?" Billy nodded again. "I know, Dad," he said. "That's why I've been doing my best to practice. 'Cause I want to help." He stared up at me with a bright-eyed excitement. It did nothing to help the nausea in my stomach. Billy's only a kid. He's only young. Involving him in all this was the last thing I ever wanted to do. But sometimes you don't have a choice. Sometimes the alternatives are worse. The old man was very clear in the instructions he left behind. If the whole family isn't in on it, it won't work. And if the whole family doesn't try and make it work, he'll know. Oh yes, he always knows. The first time I went down to the basement, I left Billy behind. Thought it wouldn't matter. But that night, Canteen came to me while I slept. Visited me. I dreamed I was trapped in bed with my arms pinned at my sides and he was looming over me, watching. He didn't say anything, just pointed a finger at the photo of Billy on my beside table. The message was clear enough. If you don't do exactly what I ask, it won't be you that suffers, it'll be your son. Now I reached down and ruffled Billy's hair with a trembling hand. In the basement below us, the screams grew louder. "I know you only want to help," I whispered. "I know you want to see your grandpa again. But part of helping is making sure we keep what we're doing here a secret too. Do you understand that?" Billy looked down at the floor and nodded for a third time, shoulders slumped. Right then, I didn't know what was worse, the fact that I had no choice but to involve him, or the fact he seemed to want to be involved. The fact that sometimes, when he looked at me in a certain light, I saw traces of his granddad in him. "I'll tell you what," I said after a moment. "If you promise me you'll start behaving in school, I'll let you choose the best parts on this one. How does that sound?" You're still a bit too little to help with the operation, but that doesn't mean you can't be useful." Billy stared up at me with wide eyes. "Really, Dad? You sure?" I nodded at him, forced myself to smile, felt the nausea in my stomach roll and churn. Billy's a good kid. I know, he's a good kid. All I really want to do is protect him. I spent the last 11 years of my life trying to do just that, and 3 months ago I thought I'd succeeded. 3 months ago, when his grandpa had a heart attack, I thought the nightmare was finally over. But then I found the instructions he'd left behind for us. I started seeing him in my nightmares, and I realized it wasn't really over after all. Now I watched as Billy ran over to the top of the basement steps. He paused and grinned back at me. "I know 2 kids in my class who lost their granddads as well," he said suddenly, "and they're both sad because they'll never get to see them again. But I'm not sad, Dad. I'm lucky. We both are." He turned and ran down the steps. I followed after him, shut the door firmly behind us. The screams were louder than ever now, and Billy's next words, which echoed back to me up the staircase, were almost lost in the noise. "Only a couple more bits and pieces to go now," he shouted, "and I'll have a brand new granddad."